The autumn rain hammered against the tall windows of Meridian, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, where a single reservation could cost more than most people's monthly rent. The dining room glowed with warm, amber light from crystal chandeliers, casting elegant shadows across tables dressed in pristine white linen. Outside, the city's relentless energy pulsed through the wet streets of Midtown, but inside, everything moved with calculated precision. Every gesture, every word, every carefully plated dish. Maya Rodriguez had been working at Meridian for 3 years, ever since she'd moved to New York from El Paso, Texas. At 28, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her popular among both staff and customers. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, her uniform impeccable despite the grueling 12-hour shifts. But what set Maya apart wasn't just her professionalism. It was the textbook she kept hidden in her locker, the one she studied during her 15-minute breaks, the one that represented everything she was fighting for. "Table 12 needs water," barked Laurent, the floor manager, his French accent thick with irritation. "And Marcus wants you on table 7, high-profile group. Don't mess it up." Maya nodded, grabbing a crystal pitcher. She'd learned to let Laurent's constant criticism roll off her back. He treated all the servers poorly, but especially her, perhaps because she'd never shown him the deference he expected, or perhaps because she'd once corrected his pronunciation of a mathematical term he'd been mocking another server for not understanding. Table 7 was positioned near the window, offering a panoramic view of the rain-slicked streets below. 5 men occupied it, all wearing suits that cost more than Maya's annual tuition. She recognized the type immediately: tech executives, venture capitalists, the kind of men who discussed millions as casually as most people talked about the weather. "Good evening, gentlemen," Maya said with practiced warmth as she approached. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Finally," one of them said, barely glancing up from his phone. "Scotch, neat, the Macallan 25. Maya worked her way around the table, taking orders with efficient precision. The men barely acknowledged her presence, continuing their conversation as if she were part of the furniture. She'd grown accustomed to this particular brand of invisibility. "The algorithm is solid, Richard," one man was saying, gesturing with his wine glass. "But the valuation is insane. 40 billion for a company that's never turned a profit." "That's the game now," another replied. "It's not about profit, it's about potential. You should know that." The man at the head of the table had remained silent throughout the ordering process. When Maya reached him, she finally looked at his face. He was perhaps 45, with salt and pepper hair styled perfectly, sharp blue eyes, and the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. His suit was impeccable, dark navy with subtle pinstripes, and his watch probably cost more than her car. "And for you, sir?" Maya asked. He looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in his expression. Actual acknowledgement. "Surprise me," he said, "something that pairs well with the scallops." It was a test, Maya realized. She'd seen it before, wealthy patrons checking if the staff actually knew anything beyond taking orders. "The Chablis Grand Cru would be excellent with the scallops," she said without hesitation. "It's crisp, mineral-forward, and won't overpower the delicate flavors. Or, if you prefer something with more body, the white Burgundy from Meursault." His eyebrows raised slightly. "The Chablis. Good choice." As Maya turned to leave, she heard them resume their conversation, but the tone had shifted. They were discussing something technical now, something about neural networks and machine learning algorithms. Despite herself, Maya slowed her pace slightly, catching fragments of their discussion. "The problem is the training data," one was saying. "Garbage in, garbage out. You can't expect accurate predictions when your foundation is flawed." "That's exactly what I've been saying," another interjected. but Richard here thinks throwing more computing power at it will solve everything. It's not about power, the man at the head of the table. Richard, apparently, said with measured patience. It's about architecture. You're all still thinking in terms of traditional neural networks. What we need is... Maya forced herself to keep walking. She couldn't afford to be caught eavesdropping, especially not by Laurent, who was watching her like a hawk from across the room. The evening progressed with its usual rhythm. Maya moved between tables, refilling glasses, taking orders, delivering perfectly plated dishes with artistic precision. The kitchen was chaos. Chef Antoine screaming in French, line cooks moving in synchronized pandemonium, but the dining room maintained its facade of serene elegance. Around 9 o'clock, Maya was clearing the appetizer plates from table 7 when she noticed something on the floor near Richard's chair. A napkin, crumpled slightly, with dark ink marks visible on the white cloth. She bent to pick it up, intending to throw it away, when she saw what was written on it. Mathematical equations. Complex ones. She recognized them immediately, variants of backpropagation algorithms used in deep learning networks. But there was an error, a subtle one that most people wouldn't catch. But it was there, in the third line where the partial derivative had been incorrectly calculated. Maya's fingers tightened on the napkin. She should throw it away. She should forget about it. She should remember her place. Remember that she was just a waitress. Remember all the reasons why calling attention to herself was a bad idea. But she'd spent too many nights studying these exact concepts. Too many early mornings working through problem sets before her shifts. Too many stolen moments during breaks reviewing papers on machine learning theory. The error bothered her like an itch she couldn't scratch. "Everything all right?" Richard's voice startled her. He was watching her with curious eyes. Maya looked down at the napkin, then back at him. Every instinct told her to apologize and walk away. Instead, she heard herself say, "There's a mistake in the equation." The table fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned to her. "I'm sorry," Richard said, his tone amused but not unkind. Maya's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. The partial derivative in the third line. The chain rule wasn't applied correctly. It should be dw multiplied by dwdh, not just dedh. One of the other men laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Richard, your waitress is giving you math lessons now. That's a first." But Richard wasn't laughing. He was staring at Maya with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "Show me," he said quietly. Maya hesitated. This was already too far. Laurent was probably watching, probably already planning to write her up for inappropriate interaction with customers. But Richard was holding out a pen, his expression serious now, genuinely curious. She took the pen with fingers that trembled slightly, then smoothed the napkin on the edge of the table. "Here," she said, circling the error. "When you're calculating the gradient for backpropagation through a multi-layer network, you need to account for each layer's transformation. You've collapsed 2 steps into one, which will give you incorrect weight updates." She sketched out the correction quickly, her movements confident despite her nerves. This is the proper chain rule application. It adds computational steps, but the accuracy improvement is significant, especially in deeper networks. When she looked up, Richard was leaning forward, studying her work with complete focus. The other men at the table had gone quiet, their earlier amusement replaced by confusion and something that might have been embarrassment. "Where did you learn this?" Richard asked. "MIT OpenCourseware mostly," Maya said, setting down the pen. "Stanford's machine learning lectures, some papers from NIPS and ICML conferences, wherever I can find good material." "You're self-taught?" Maya nodded. "I'm working on my bachelor's degree, part-time, online, through CUNY. Computer science with a focus on artificial intelligence." She could feel Laurent's glare burning into her back from across the room. I should get back to work. I apologize if I overstepped. Wait! Richard's hand came up, not touching her but stopping her departure nonetheless. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, and held it out. Richard Chen. I'm CEO of Neural Tech Systems. We're developing next-generation AI platforms. Maya took the card mechanically. The name was familiar. She'd read about neural tech in TechCrunch articles, seen their papers cited in research she'd studied. How far are you from finishing your degree? Richard asked. 2 years, maybe 3. I can only take 2 classes per semester while working full-time. And after that? Maya allowed herself a small, rueful smile. After that, probably still waiting tables while I look for an entry-level position that will take a chance on someone without a prestigious degree or industry connections. Maybe eventually I'll get a junior developer job somewhere, if I'm lucky. One of the other men muttered something under his breath, but Richard silenced him with a glance. What if I told you, Richard said slowly, that you could finish your degree faster, and that I know people at MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, places that would be very interested in someone with your obvious aptitude? Maya's chest tightened. Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but I can't afford. I'm not talking about paying your way, Richard interrupted, though Neural Tech does have a scholarship program. I'm talking about getting you in front of the right people, making sure your application gets more than a cursory glance. The rest would be up to you. Why? The word came out before Maya could stop it. Why would you do that? Richard leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at his lips. Because I just spent 3 months with a team of PhDs from Stanford and MIT working on that algorithm, and none of them caught that error. Because talent is talent, regardless of where it's found, and because, he gestured at the napkin, someone who can spot a mistake in backpropagation theory while working a dinner shift is exactly the kind of person who should be advancing the field. Amaya's mind raced. It sounded too good to be true. It probably was too good to be true. People like Richard Chen didn't just help waitresses, didn't just offer connections that could change lives. There had to be a catch, had to be something he wanted in return. But before she could respond, Laurent appeared at her elbow, his face tight with barely controlled fury. Ms. Rodriguez. A word. Now. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked at Richard, at the business card in her hand, at the equation on the napkin that had somehow upended her entire evening in the span of 5 minutes. Think about it, Richard said. Call me when you've decided. Maya nodded mutely and followed Laurent away from the table, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Behind her, she could hear the men at table 7 resuming their conversation, but their voices seemed distant, unreal. As Laurent pulled her into the service corridor, his face red with anger, Maya clutched the business card in her pocket. She knew she was probably about to be fired. She knew she'd crossed a line, drawn attention to herself in exactly the way she'd spent 3 years avoiding. But for the first time since moving to New York, since taking this job, since starting down this seemingly impossible path toward a future she barely let herself dream about, for the first time, Maya allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, something could change. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean, and somewhere in the warm glow of Meridian's dining room, an equation on a napkin represented the intersection of 2 worlds that were never supposed to meet. Laurent's office was a cramped space behind the kitchen, barely larger than a storage closet. The walls were covered with schedules, health code violations, notices, and faded photographs of Laurent shaking hands with various celebrities who'd dined at Meridian over the years. The room smelled of stale coffee and the harsh lemon cleaner the night crew used on the floors. Maya stood with her back straight, hands clasped in front of her, while Laurent paced in the small space like a caged animal. Through the thin walls, she could hear the kitchen staff shouting orders, the clatter of pans, the constant symphony of controlled chaos that was dinner service. 3 years, Laurent said, his accent thicker when he was angry. 3 years you work here and never have you caused me a problem. And tonight you decide to embarrass our most important customer. I didn't mean to, Maya started. You corrected Richard Chen. Laurent spun to face her, his face flushed. Do you understand who that man is? He spent $40,000 here last month. 40,000. And you made him look foolish in front of his colleagues. Maya's jaw tightened. I didn't make him look foolish. There was an error in his work, and I pointed it out. He asked me to explain. You are a waitress. Laurent's voice rose. Your job is to smile, to bring food, to be invisible, not to... He gestured wildly, to give mathematics lessons to billionaires. He seemed interested in what I had to say. I don't care if he wanted you to perform circus tricks. You overstepped. Laurent moved behind his desk, shuffling papers with angry movements. I should fire you right now. You know that, yes? Maya's heart sank, but she kept her voice level. Yes, but I won't. Laurent pulled out a form, slamming it on the desk. Because Mr. Chen specifically requested that I don't. In fact, he left you this. He shoved an envelope across the desk. Your tip, $5,000 for pointing out his mistake. Maya stared at the envelope, not touching it. $5,000. That was 4 months of rent or a full semester of tuition or... Take it, Laurent said bitterly. Take it and get out. You're done for tonight. And Maya... He waited until she looked at him. Don't ever pull something like that again. Rich men playing at being impressed. It means nothing. Tomorrow he won't remember your name. But he will remember that Meridian has staff who don't know their place. And that will cost me, understand? Maya picked up the envelope with numb fingers. I understand. Good. Now get out. Din. The rain had intensified by the time Maya emerged from the restaurant's staff entrance into the alley. It was nearly 11, and the streets were quieter now, though New York never truly slept. She stood under the narrow overhang, watching the water cascade from the roof, feeling the weight of the evening settling over her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Jessica. Working late again? There's leftover pizza if you want it. Maya didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out Richard Chen's business card, studying it under the harsh fluorescent light of the exit sign. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, minimalist design. Everything about it screamed money and power, 2 things Maya had never had and never expected to have. She should throw it away. She should forget this whole evening happened. Laurent was right. Men like Richard Chen didn't change the lives of people like her. They offered glimpses of possibilities maybe, but then they moved on to their next meeting, their next deal, their next world-changing project, and people like Maya faded back into the background where they belonged. But she couldn't stop thinking about the look on his face when she'd corrected the equation. Not anger, not embarrassment, genuine interest, curiosity, the kind of intellectual engagement she rarely experienced outside of her online coursework. Rough night? Maya jumped, nearly dropping the card. A woman stood at the edge of the alley, protected from the rain by a sleek black umbrella. She was perhaps 50, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than Maya made in 6 months. Her eyes were kind, but sharp, the eyes of someone who missed nothing. I'm sorry, Maya said. Did you need something? I'm Patricia Morrison. I was dining at Meridian tonight, table 14. The woman stepped closer, extending her hand. I witnessed what happened with Richard Chen. Maya shook her hand cautiously. Oh, that was either very brave or very foolish, Patricia said. I haven't decided which yet. Neither have I, Patricia smiled. I like honest answers. Walk with me? She gestured toward the street. My car's just around the corner, and I hate seeing anyone stand in the rain. Maya hesitated, but something about Patricia's demeanor put her at ease. They walked together to the street, where a black sedan waited at the curb. Patricia didn't get in, instead turning to face Maya under the umbrella, which she held high enough to shelter them both. "I know Richard Chen," Patricia said. "Have for years. We served on a board together for a non-profit focused on STEM education. He's brilliant, genuinely committed to identifying and nurturing talent, and—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, not always aware of how his actions affect people in different circumstances. "I don't understand," Maya said. "That business card he gave you, that offer to help? He means it completely. Richard sees potential, and he wants to help, but he doesn't always think through the complications." Patricia's expression was sympathetic. "Let me guess, your manager wasn't thrilled about what happened." Maya's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought. And now you're standing here wondering if taking Richard up on his offer will cost you your job, your stability, everything you've worked for, wondering if it's worth the risk. How did you—" "Because I've seen it before," Patricia said gently. "I've seen Richard make generous offers to people who couldn't afford to accept them. Not because he's cruel, but because when you've lived your whole life with a safety net, you forget what it's like to walk a tightrope without one." Maya clutched the envelope in her pocket, feeling the thickness of the bills inside. "So what should I do?" "That depends. Tell me about yourself. Not the Waitress version, the real version." Something in Patricia's tone made Maya want to trust her. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the surreal nature of the entire evening, but Maya found herself talking. She told Patricia about growing up in El Paso, about being the first person in her family to attempt college, about working 2 jobs to save enough money to move to New York because the tech opportunities were here, not in Texas. She talked about the online courses, the textbooks she bought used or borrowed from the library, the way she studied machine learning algorithms during her subway commute because it was the only spare time she had. "I'm 28 years old," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly, "and I'm still 2 years away from a bachelor's degree that might get me an entry-level position somewhere. And even that's assuming I can keep working full-time while taking classes, assuming I don't get sick or have an emergency or lose my job because I can't keep my mouth shut about equations on napkins." Patricia listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. When Maya finished, she was quiet for a moment, the sound of rain filling the space between them. "I run a venture capital firm," Patricia said finally. "Morrison Capital. We specialize in early-stage tech investments, particularly in AI and machine learning. And I'm constantly frustrated by how difficult it is to find diverse talent in the field. Not because the talent doesn't exist, but because people like you never make it through the gates. Let me finish." Patricia's voice was firm, but not unkind. "I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a proposal. Morrison Capital has an internship program. It's competitive. It pays well, $60,000 a year, and it's designed for people who are completing their education while working in the field. We cover tuition for approved coursework, and we provide real project experience with our portfolio companies." Maya's breath caught. That's incredibly generous, but you don't trust it," Patricia finished, "because nothing in your life has ever been that easy, and you're waiting for the catch. Is there one?" "Yes." Patricia's honesty was refreshing. "The catch is that you'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. The catch is that our acceptance rate is around 5%. The catch is that if you accept, you'll be stepping into a world where you'll be constantly evaluated, constantly compared to people who've had every advantage you haven't. The catch is that it's terrifying." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Richard's offer was real, but vague, and vague offers don't pay rent." Patricia pulled out her own business card, pressing it into Maya's hand along with a folder. "This is an application packet. If you're interested, fill it out and send it to me within 2 weeks. We have a rolling admissions process, and our next cohort starts in January. That gives you time to think, to plan, to make an informed decision rather than an emotional one." Maya looked down at the folder, her hands shaking slightly. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "One more thing," Patricia said. "That $5,000 Richard gave you? Don't spend it yet. Save it. You're going to need a financial cushion over the next few months, regardless of what you decide to do. Change is expensive, even when it's positive." "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet. Go home, get some sleep, look over the materials. We'll talk if you decide to apply." Patricia opened her car door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you have real potential. Not because you corrected Richard's equation, though that was impressive, but because you had the courage to speak up despite knowing it might cost you. That's rare. Don't lose it." The car pulled away, leaving Maya standing alone on the sidewalk, holding 2 business cards and a folder that might contain her future. The rain was letting up now, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the streetlights. Maya's phone buzzed again. "Jessica. Hey, you okay? Getting worried?" She typed back, "I'm fine. Be home soon. Weird night. Tell you about it tomorrow." The subway ride back to her apartment in Astoria was nearly empty. Maya sat by the window, watching the tunnel walls blur past, trying to process everything that had happened. Just 8 hours ago, her life had been predictable, stable, manageable. Now it felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet, revealing possibilities she'd never let herself seriously consider. She opened the folder Patricia had given her. Inside was a detailed overview of the Morrison Capital internship program, including testimonials from previous participants, many of whom had gone on to impressive positions at major tech companies or founded their own startups. There was also a note, handwritten on expensive stationery. "Maya, talent isn't enough. Opportunity isn't enough. What matters is what you do when the two collide. I hope you'll give yourself a chance to find out." Patricia Morrison. By the time Maya reached her stop, a decision had begun forming in her mind. It wasn't about the money, or the prestige, or even the opportunity itself. It was about the equation on the napkin, about the fact that she'd seen something wrong and had chosen to speak up despite every instinct telling her to stay silent. She thought about all the times she'd swallowed her knowledge, played dumb, made herself smaller to fit into a world that expected nothing more from her than efficiency and invisibility. She thought about the textbooks in her locker, the problem set she worked through at 3 in the morning, the dreams she'd kept locked away because they seemed too impossible to speak aloud. Maybe it was time to stop making herself smaller. Maybe it was time to take up space. The apartment she shared with Jessica was on the 4th floor of a building that had seen better days. Jessica was asleep on the couch, textbook open on her chest. She was studying to be a nurse, working just as hard as Maya toward her own uncertain future. Maya covered her with a blanket, then sat at their tiny kitchen table, pulling out the application materials. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, and through the window she could see the Manhattan skyline in the distance, lit up like a constellation that had fallen to earth. She thought about Patricia's words. Change is expensive even when it's positive. She thought about Richard's. Talent is talent, regardless of where it's found. She thought about Laurent's. Rich men playing at being impressed. It means nothing. And then she thought about her own voice, steady and sure, explaining the error in the equation to 5 men who'd probably never been corrected by a waitress before. The chain rule wasn't applied correctly. Maya pulled out her laptop, opened a new document, and began to write. Not the application, not yet. First, she needed to write a letter of resignation from Meridian. If she was going to do this, if she was going to reach for this impossible opportunity, she needed to do it on her own terms. Laurent was right about one thing. Rich men might forget her name tomorrow. But Maya Rodriguez was done forgetting her own. 3 months had passed since the night at Meridian, and Maya's life had transformed in ways that still felt surreal. The Morrison Capital offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district, with views that stretched across New York Harbor. Every morning, Maya took the subway from Astoria, emerging into the crowds of Lower Manhattan, still half expecting someone to tell her there'd been a mistake, that she didn't belong here. But no one had told her that. Instead, she'd been welcomed into a world she'd only observed from the outside. A world of whiteboards covered in algorithms, conference rooms where million-dollar decisions were made over coffee, and brilliant minds working on problems that would shape the future of technology. The application process had been grueling. 4 rounds of interviews, including a technical assessment that had lasted 6 hours. Patricia had made it clear that Maya would receive no preferential treatment. If anything, she'd be held to a higher standard because of how she'd entered their awareness. But Maya had been ready. Every late-night studying, every problem set completed during lunch breaks, every concept she'd wrestled with until it clicked, it had all prepared her for this moment. She'd gotten the call on a Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks before Christmas. Patricia's assistant had been professional, but warm. "Ms. Morrison would like to offer you a position in our next internship cohort. If you accept, you'll start January 3rd. Maya had said yes before she'd even fully processed the question. Now, in late March, she sat in a glass-walled conference room with 5 other interns, preparing to present their first major project to Patricia and her investment committee. The assignment had been challenging. Analyze 3 AI startups and recommend which one Morrison Capital should invest in. Maya and her team had spent 6 weeks diving deep into technical architectures, business models, market potential, and competitive landscapes. "You ready for this?" asked James, one of her fellow interns. He was 24, fresh out of Stanford with a computer science degree, and the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to fight for his opportunities. He'd been skeptical of Maya at first. She'd sensed it in his questions, the way he double-checked her work, but over the past few weeks, they'd developed a genuine partnership. "As ready as I'll ever be," Maya said, reviewing her notes one last time. She'd volunteered to present the technical analysis, the most complex part of their recommendation. It was a risk, but calculated. She needed to prove, especially to herself, that she belonged here. The door opened, and Patricia entered with 3 other partners. Maya recognized Robert Chen from photos, Patricia's co-founder, a former MIT professor who'd built 2 successful AI companies before moving into venture capital. Next to him was Sandra Okonkwo, who'd made her fortune in telecommunications before pivoting to tech investing. The third partner was someone Maya hadn't met before, a younger woman, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she suffered fools poorly. "Good morning, everyone," Patricia said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "This is Dr. Jennifer Wu, who's joining us as our newest partner. She brings 20 years of experience in machine learning research and commercialization." She gestured to Maya's team. "Jennifer, this is our winter cohort. They've been working on the Neurotech Diligence project." Dr. Wu nodded, her gaze sweeping across the interns with obvious assessment. Maya felt her stomach tighten. Another test, another opportunity to prove herself or fail spectacularly. James started the presentation, walking through the market analysis. He was good, articulate, confident, backed up by solid data. Then came Sarah, covering the business models, followed by Marcus on competitive landscape. Each of them delivered polished, professional presentations that would have impressed most audiences. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood, pulling up her slides, and took a deep breath. Our technical analysis focused on three key areas: architectural innovation, scalability, and defensibility. Of the three companies we evaluated, Neurovision initially appeared to be the strongest candidate. Their convolutional neural network architecture for medical imaging has received significant attention, and their early results are promising. Maya advanced to the next slide, showing the company's technical specifications. However, when we dug deeper into their approach, we identified several concerns that significantly impact our recommendation. She could feel Dr. Wu's attention sharpen, leaning forward slightly. First, their training methodology relies heavily on publicly available datasets, which means their core technology has limited proprietary advantages. Any competitor with sufficient resources could replicate their results. Maya pulled up a detailed comparison. Second, and more critically, their architecture doesn't account for domain shift, the performance degradation that occurs when you apply a model trained on one dataset to images from a different source. In medical imaging, this is a fatal flaw. How did you identify this? Dr. Wu interrupted, her voice crisp. Maya had been waiting for this question. I replicated their published results using the same public data sets they described in their papers. The performance matched their claims. But then I tested the model on a different medical imaging data set, one from a different hospital system with different equipment. The accuracy dropped by 38%. The room went quiet. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but Maya caught a slight nod. Continue. This means that while Neurovision's technology works well in controlled conditions, it's not robust enough for real-world deployment, where data sources are variable and unpredictable. Maya advanced to her final slide. By contrast, our second candidate, CogniMed, has developed a domain adaptation framework that specifically addresses this challenge. Their technology is more complex, their results less flashy, but their approach is fundamentally sound and defensible. Show me the code, Dr. Wu said. Maya had expected this too. She pulled up her laptop, sharing her screen to display the analysis she'd conducted. This is the replication code I wrote to test Neurovision's approach, along with the adaptation experiments I ran. All of it is documented here, including the specific parameters and data sources. Dr. Wu stood, moving closer to examine the screen. She scrolled through Maya's code in silence, her expression unreadable. The other interns exchanged nervous glances. James looked like he might be sick. They'd based their entire recommendation on Maya's technical analysis. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Wu stepped back. This is graduate-level research, she said quietly. Where did you learn to do this kind of validation? MIT OpenCourseWare, primarily, Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Professor Ng's machine learning course, Professor Torralba's computer vision course, and various papers from CVPR and NeurIPS conferences, plus my own coursework at QNY, though that's more foundational. You're self-taught. Mostly, yes. Dr. Wu looked at Patricia. You didn't tell me you had someone doing this level of technical diligence. Because I wanted your unbiased assessment, Patricia said, a slight smile playing at her lips. What's your evaluation? My evaluation is that this analysis is better than what most PhD candidates could produce, and it raises serious questions about Neurovision's viability. Dr. Wu turned back to Maya. What's your final recommendation? Maya glanced at her team, then at the partners. This was the moment that mattered. We recommend passing on Neurovision, despite their impressive pedigree and press coverage. The technology isn't as robust as it appears. Cognimed is the stronger investment, though they'll need more capital to reach commercialization. The third company, Health AI, has potential but should be revisited in a year when they've had more time to develop. Robert Chen spoke for the first time. You realize Neurovision just raised a Series B at a $200 million valuation, led by Sequoia Capital. Yes, sir. And you're confident enough in your analysis to recommend we pass on a deal that some of the smartest investors in Silicon Valley just backed. Maya met his gaze. I'm confident that their technology has a fundamental flaw that will become apparent as soon as they try to deploy in diverse real-world settings. Maybe Sequoia has information we don't, or maybe they're betting on the team's ability to solve the problem. But based on the technical evidence we've reviewed, it's not a sound investment for Morrison Capital right now. The silence in the room was heavy. Then Patricia laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that broke the tension. Thank you, all of you, Patricia said to the interns. Excellent work. Can you give us the room for a few minutes? The interns filed out, Maya's heart still pounding. In the hallway, James grabbed her arm. That was either brilliant or career suicide. I can't tell which yet. And neither can I, Maya admitted. They waited in the common area, making awkward small talk, each of them trying to gauge how the presentation had been received. Maya's mind raced through the analysis again, checking for errors, reconsidering her conclusions. Had she been too aggressive, too confident? Had she misread the data? After 15 minutes that felt like hours, Patricia's assistant appeared. Maya, they'd like to see you. Maya's stomach dropped. The others looked at her with sympathy. They all knew what it meant when the partners wanted to see just one person after a group presentation. She walked back to the conference room on unsteady legs, rehearsing explanations and apologies in her head. But when she entered, the atmosphere wasn't what she'd expected. Sit down, Maya, Patricia said, gesturing to a chair. All 4 partners were still there, and they were all smiling. Your analysis was exceptional, Dr. Wu said without preamble. Not just technically sound, but practically useful. That's rare. We called Neurovision's CEO after you left, Robert added. Asked some pointed questions about domain adaptation. He got defensive, started talking about future improvements they were planning, which tells me your concerns are valid. Maya's head spun. So, I'm not in trouble. Trouble? Patricia laughed again. Maya, we're offering you a full-time position after you complete your bachelor's degree, if you're interested. We'd like you to join Morrison Capital as a technical analyst. The job would involve exactly what you did today, deep technical diligence on potential investments, working directly with our partners to evaluate deals. The starting salary would be $140,000, Sandra said, sliding a folder across the table, plus equity in the fund and full benefits. We'd also cover the remainder of your undergraduate tuition and provide resources for graduate school if you choose to pursue a master's or PhD. Maya stared at the folder, unable to move. 6 months ago, she'd been serving drinks at Meridian, hoping to finish her bachelor's degree before she turned 35. Now. This is conditional, of course, Patricia continued. You need to complete your degree, maintain your performance here during the internship, and continue developing your technical skills. But Maya, we've been doing this a long time, and we know talent when we see it. You have something special, not just technical ability, but intellectual courage. You were willing to challenge a deal that everyone else was excited about because you trusted your analysis. Maya's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, tried again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, Dr. Wu said. This is a big decision. Take your time, talk to people you trust, ask questions. We're not going anywhere. But Maya didn't need time. She'd spent 3 years studying during lunch breaks, 3 years watching opportunities pass her by, 3 years wondering if she'd ever get a chance to do something that mattered. She wasn't going to hesitate now. "I accept," she said. "Thank you. Thank you all." That evening, Maya stood in her apartment, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Jessica had insisted on celebrating, bringing home champagne from the corner store and ordering Thai food from their favorite place. They'd invited a few friends over, and the small apartment was filled with laughter and congratulations. But Maya kept finding herself drawn to the window, to the view of the city that had seemed so impossible when she'd first arrived. She thought about the equation on the napkin, about Richard Chen's curiosity and Patricia Morrison's faith. She thought about every night she'd studied until her eyes blurred, every time she'd doubted whether any of it would matter. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the offer. Heard about your presentation. Exceptional work. Richard Chen." Maya smiled. She still had Richard's business card, tucked away in her desk drawer. She'd never called him, never taken him up on his offer to make connections. She'd forged her own path instead, through Patricia's opportunity and her own relentless work. But she was grateful nonetheless, grateful for the moment when he'd chosen to see her as more than a waitress, grateful for the card that had given her hope on a rainy night when she'd needed it most. She typed back, "Thank you for everything. That equation on the napkin changed my life." His response came quickly. "You changed your own life. I just handed you a napkin. The rest was all you." Maya looked around her apartment, at Jessica laughing with friends, at the textbooks stacked on every surface, at the acceptance letter from Morrison Capital propped up on the bookshelf. This was what earned opportunity looked like. Not handed down from above, not given as charity, but fought for and seized when the moment came. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, standing in the rain, clutching a business card and wondering if she had the courage to change her life. She thought about that girl's dreams, her fears, her carefully managed expectations, and she was grateful to that girl for taking the first step, for speaking up about an equation when every instinct told her to stay silent, for believing, just barely, just enough, that maybe she deserved more than invisibility. "Come on!" Jessica called from the living room. "Stop being contemplative and come celebrate with us." Maya turned away from the window, tucking her phone in her pocket. The future stretched before her, uncertain and thrilling, full of challenges she'd have to overcome and opportunities she'd have to earn. But for tonight, she would celebrate. Tomorrow she would go back to work, back to learning, back to proving herself every single day. Tomorrow, the hard work would continue. But tonight, Maya Rodriguez allowed herself to simply be proud of how far she'd come and excited about where she might go next. 2 years had passed and Maya stood in a very different conference room, this time at Columbia University, where she'd been invited to speak to undergraduate students about careers in tech investing. The irony wasn't lost on her. The girl who'd studied through MIT OpenCourseware because she couldn't afford tuition was now advising Ivy League students about their futures. She'd completed her bachelor's degree 18 months ago, finishing summa cum laude while working full-time at Morrison Capital. The ceremony had been one of the proudest moments of her life. Her parents had flown in from El Paso, her father weeping openly as Maya walked across the stage. She'd sent them the first of many checks shortly after, helping to pay off the mortgage on their small house. It had felt like closing a circle, repaying the sacrifices they'd made to give her opportunities they'd never had. Now, at 30, Maya was thriving in ways she'd never imagined possible. She'd become one of Morrison Capital's most valuable analysts, known for her ability to identify both technical excellence and fatal flaws in potential investments. Her work had helped the firm avoid several disasters and identify 2 companies that had generated massive returns, but success had brought its own complications. "Ms. Rodriguez." A student's hand went up. A young woman with nervous eyes. How did you deal with imposter syndrome? I mean, everyone here seems so confident, so prepared. I feel like I'm always catching up. Maya smiled, recognizing herself in that question. I still feel that way sometimes, she said honestly. But I've learned that the feeling of catching up never really goes away. It just means you're continuing to grow. The day you feel completely comfortable is probably the day you've stopped pushing yourself. She talked about her journey, not glossing over the difficulties, not pretending it had been easy. She told them about studying on the subway, about the nights she'd wondered if she was wasting her time, about the moment when speaking up about an equation had changed everything. The most important thing I learned, Maya said, is that you can't wait for permission to be taken seriously. You have to take yourself seriously first. Do the work, build the skills, and when the opportunity comes, and it will come, be ready to seize it. After the talk, students crowded around with questions. Maya answered each one patiently, remembering how hungry she'd been for guidance, for any sign that someone like her could succeed. One student hung back, waiting until the others had dispersed. She was perhaps 22, dressed neatly, but in clothes that had clearly seen better days. Maya recognized the signs, the careful maintenance, the slightly worn shoes that had been polished until they gleamed. "Can I help you?" Maya asked gently. "I'm Maria Torres," the girl said. "I'm a junior here, computer science major, but I'm on a full scholarship, and I work 20 hours a week, and I—" She stopped, took a breath. "I heard your story, and it gave me hope. But I'm also terrified. I don't have connections, I don't have money, and everyone here seems so far ahead of me." Maya's chest tightened. It was like looking in a mirror, seeing her younger self reflected in this nervous student. "Can I buy you coffee?" Maya asked. They walked to a cafe near campus, settling into a quiet corner. Maya listened as Maria poured out her story, growing up in the Bronx, being the first in her family to attend college, working multiple jobs to cover expenses that her scholarship didn't. The details were different, but the core experience was painfully familiar. "I'm graduating next year," Maria said, stirring her coffee without drinking it, "and I have no idea how to break into the industry. Every internship posting requires experience I don't have, or connections I don't have, or knowledge of systems I've never had access to." "Tell me about your technical skills," Maya said. "What have you been studying?" Maria's face brightened slightly. "I'm focusing on natural language processing. I think it's fascinating. The way machines can learn to understand human language, the potential applications for accessibility and translation. I've been working on a project analyzing bias in language models, looking at how training data affects outputs." "Show me." Maria pulled out a laptop that had clearly been repaired multiple times, navigating to a GitHub repository. Maya leaned in, examining the code. It was good, not perfect, but thoughtful, well documented, showing genuine understanding of the underlying concepts. "This is impressive work," Maya said. "Have you published any of these findings?" "I've been trying," Maria admitted, "but getting into conferences is competitive, and I don't have an advisor who's well connected in the field. My research gets lost in the shuffle." Maya pulled out her phone, opening her contacts. "I'm going to give you some names. Researchers at places like NYU, Columbia, MIT, people who are doing work in NLP and who value diverse perspectives. They're always looking for talented students to collaborate with." "But why would they care about me?" "Because you're doing interesting work, and because I'm going to introduce you." Maya looked at Maria seriously. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to make some introductions. You're going to follow up professionally, share your work, and be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked. Some of these people might ignore you, some might offer advice. One or two might offer real opportunities. It's on you to be ready." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" Because someone helped me once, Maya said simply. And because this is how we change an industry that's terrible at recognizing talent in unconventional places. Over the next few weeks, Maya made good on her promise. She reached out to colleagues and contacts, recommending Maria for research positions and internships. She reviewed Maria's applications, helped her prepare for interviews, and offered guidance on navigating the professional world of tech. But she also made sure to challenge Maria, to push her to produce her best work, to prepare her for the reality that help would only take her so far. The rest would be up to her. It reminded Maya of her own journey, of Patricia Morrison's tough love and high expectations. The best help wasn't about making things easy, it was about ensuring someone was ready when opportunities arrived. Meanwhile, Maya's own career continued to evolve. She'd been approached by several companies about leadership positions, offers that would have doubled her already generous salary. But something kept her at Morrison Capital, a sense that she wasn't finished yet, that there was more she wanted to accomplish here. In April, Patricia called her into her office. "Close the door," she said, which always preceded important conversations. Maya sat, trying to read Patricia's expression. "Is everything okay?" "More than okay. I want to talk to you about your future here." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "You've exceeded every expectation, Maya. You've become one of our most valuable team members, but I know you've been getting outside offers, and I wouldn't blame you if you took one." "I'm happy here," Maya said honestly. "Are you? Or are you comfortable?" Patricia's eyes were sharp. "There's a difference." Maya considered the question carefully. "I'm grateful for everything Morrison Capital has given me. But no, I'm not just comfortable, I'm still learning, still growing. I feel like I have more to contribute here." "Good, because I have a proposal." Patricia pulled out a folder. "We're launching a new initiative, a program specifically designed to identify and support technical talent from non-traditional backgrounds. People like you. People who have the ability but lack the access. I want you to lead it." Maya's breath caught. "Lead it? But I'm only 30. I've only been in the industry for 2 years. "Exactly. Which means you remember what it's like to be on the outside looking in. You remember what real barriers look like, not the imagined obstacles that privileged people think are challenges." Patricia pushed the folder across her desk. "This would be a significant promotion, partner track, equity stake, your own budget and team. You'd be responsible for building the program from scratch, establishing relationships with universities and coding boot camps, creating assessment frameworks that identify talent beyond traditional credentials." Maya opened the folder, her hands trembling slightly. The scope was enormous, ambitious, and terrifying in equal measure. "I know it's a lot," Patricia said softly, "and I know you might doubt whether you're ready. But Maya, I've spent 30 years in this business, and I've learned to recognize not just technical ability, but leadership potential. You have both." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take a week. Talk to people you trust. But Maya..." Patricia waited until Maya met her eyes. "Don't let fear make this decision for you. I did that once, early in my career. Turned down an opportunity because I didn't think I was ready. Spent 5 years wondering what might have been." That evening, Maya met Jessica for dinner at a restaurant in their neighborhood. Not Meridian, but a small Italian place they'd discovered during their early days in New York. Jessica was finishing her nursing degree, just months away from taking her boards. "So?" Jessica asked, pouring wine. "What did Patricia want?" Maya explained the offer, watching Jessica's face light up with excitement. "This is incredible. You're going to say yes, right?" "I don't know," Maya admitted. "It's so much responsibility." What if I fail? What if I build this program and it doesn't work? Or I make the wrong hires? Or I can't actually identify talent the way Patricia thinks I can? Jessica reached across the table, gripping Maya's hand. Do you remember when we first moved here? When you were working at Meridian and studying every spare moment, and I was doing clinical rotations while working as a medical assistant? We used to sit in our terrible apartment and dream about having opportunities like this. I remember. You told me then that you wanted to do something that mattered, that you didn't just want success for yourself. You wanted to help change the system that made success so hard to achieve for people like us. Jessica squeezed her hand. This is that chance, Maya. This is how you become part of the solution. Maya thought about Maria Torres, about the nervousness in her eyes that had mirrored Maya's own a few years ago. She thought about all the other Maria Tereses out there, brilliant and hard-working and invisible, because they didn't fit the industry's narrow definition of what talent looked like. You're right, Maya said quietly. I'm going to say yes. The following week, Maya accepted Patricia's offer. The announcement went out internally, and the response was overwhelming. Congratulations from colleagues, excitement from the other partners, and already a flood of inquiries from organizations that wanted to partner with the new initiative. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Richard Chen had reached out, congratulating her on the promotion and asking to meet. They arranged lunch at a restaurant in Tribeca, upscale but not ostentatious, the kind of place where serious business conversations happened. Congratulations, Richard said when they were seated. Patricia tells me you're building something special. Trying to, Maya said. It's still early days. You know, I've been thinking about that night at Meridian, Richard said, about the equation on the napkin. I've been in hundreds of meetings, worked with thousands of smart people, but that moment stuck with me. Do you know why? Because I corrected you? Maya offered with a slight smile. Because you didn't hesitate to speak truth to power, even when it cost you something. Richard leaned forward. That's rare. Most people, even talented people, learn to be quiet, to avoid rocking boats. They optimize for comfort instead of correctness. I almost didn't say anything, Maya admitted. I was terrified, but you did it anyway. That's the point. Richard pulled out his phone, showing her a document. I've been working on something too. Neuraltech is launching an apprenticeship program. We're going to hire 20 people per year who show technical promise but don't have traditional credentials. I want it to feed into your program at Morrison Capital. People who complete our apprenticeship will be strong candidates for your initiative. Maya felt her chest tighten with emotion. You're creating a pipeline. We're creating a pipeline together, Richard corrected. Look, that night changed my perspective too. I'd gotten comfortable hiring from the same schools, looking at the same credentials. You reminded me that talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. So let's change that. They spent the next 2 hours sketching out a partnership, discussing how to identify candidates, how to structure assessments, how to provide support without creating dependency. It was exhilarating, not just the ideas, but the realization that she was now in a position to help create the very opportunities she'd once desperately needed. 3 months later, Maya stood in a conference room at Morrison Capital, facing their first cohort of program participants, 20 people from diverse backgrounds, former teachers career switching into tech, community college students showing exceptional promise, self-taught programmers who'd never had formal training. Each of them had been selected through a rigorous process that focused on potential and drive rather than pedigree. Welcome, Maya said, looking at their nervous, hopeful faces. I know how you're feeling right now. I know you're excited and terrified and probably wondering if there's been some mistake. I was in your shoes not long ago. She told them her story, not as inspiration porn, but as honest testimony about the challenges they'd face and the work required to overcome them. "This program isn't charity," Maya said. "We're not here to hand you careers. We're here to give you access to opportunities you've earned but couldn't reach. What you do with those opportunities is up to you." She thought about Patricia's words to her 2 years ago. Talent isn't enough. Opportunity isn't enough. What matters is what you do when the two collide. "Over the next year, you're going to work harder than you've ever worked," Maya continued. "You're going to doubt yourself, probably often. You're going to feel like everyone else knows something you don't. And you know what? Sometimes they will. But you'll learn, you'll grow, and if you push through the difficult moments, you'll discover that you're capable of far more than you imagined." One participant raised her hand, a woman in her 30s, wearing the careful expression of someone who'd learned not to hope too hard. "Yes," Maya said. "What if we fail?" the woman asked. "What if we're not good enough?" Maya smiled, not dismissively, but with understanding. "Then you'll learn from it and try again. Failure isn't the end of the journey, it's part of it. The only real failure is not trying at all." As the session ended and participants filed out, Maya felt someone watching her. She turned to find Patricia standing in the doorway, a slight smile on her face. "That was well done," Patricia said. "Thank you for all of this." Maya gestured around the room. "For taking a chance on me, for trusting me with this program, for—" "Stop," Patricia said gently. "You earned this, Maya. I just provided the platform. Everything else, the work, the growth, the success, that was all you." Maya thought about the equation on the napkin, about the moment that had changed her life. She thought about Richard's curiosity, Patricia's mentorship, Maria Torres's hopeful eyes. She thought about all the people who'd helped her and all the people she could now help in turn. "It wasn't just me," Maya said. "It was a lot of people choosing to see potential instead of credentials, choosing to open doors instead of guarding them." "And now you're one of those people," Patricia said. "How does it feel?" Maya looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, at the city that had seemed so impossible when she'd first arrived. She thought about the girl who'd worked at Meridian, who'd studied on subway rides, who'd spoken up about an equation despite knowing it might cost her everything. "It feels like responsibility," Maya said honestly. "It feels like privilege. But most of all, it feels like purpose." Patricia nodded approvingly. "Good answer. Come on. We have a meeting with the executive team about expanding the program internationally." As they walked toward the elevator, Maya pulled out her phone, opening her messages. There was one from Maria Torres, who'd just accepted an internship at Google Research. There was one from the first cohort participant she'd spoken to, thanking her for the opportunity. There was one from her parents, proud and loving as always, and there was one from Richard Chen. "Saw the article about your program in TechCrunch. 20 million in funding raised. Impressive work. The equation on the napkin keeps paying dividends." Maya smiled, typing back, "Not just dividends, investments in people who will change the world. Thank you for handing me that napkin." His response came quickly. "Thank you for having the courage to correct it." The elevator doors opened, and Maya stepped inside ready for whatever came next. The journey from invisibility to influence had been long and difficult, full of doubt and determination in equal measure. But standing there, about to discuss expanding a program that could change countless lives, Maya realized something profound. She was no longer the girl desperately seeking opportunities. She had become someone who created them, and that made all the difference. 3 years later, epilogue. The auditorium at MIT was packed with students, faculty, and industry leaders gathered for the annual AI and Society conference. Maya stood backstage, adjusting her microphone, preparing to deliver the keynote address. At 33, She was now a partner at Morrison Capital. Her program had expanded to 15 cities, and she'd been featured in Forbes' 30 Under 30 list for venture capital. But what made her most proud wasn't the accolades or the success. It was the email she'd received that morning from Maria Torres, who just published her first paper at IPS and secured a faculty position at NYU. It was the 57 program alumni who now worked at major tech companies or had founded their own startups. It was the knowledge that she'd helped create a small but growing crack in the wall that kept so many talented people out of the industry. "You're on in 5, a stagehand said. Maya nodded, taking a deep breath. Through the curtain, she could hear the moderator introducing her, listing her accomplishments. It still felt surreal sometimes, being recognized, being respected, being given platforms to share her voice. She thought about the equation on the napkin, about how a single moment of courage had cascaded into a career and a mission. She thought about all the equations still unwritten, all the talented people still invisible, all the potential still untapped. As she walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, Maya carried with her not just her own story, but the stories of everyone who'd been told they didn't belong, everyone who'd worked twice as hard for half the recognition, everyone who'd ever had to choose between speaking up and staying safe. She stepped to the podium, looked out at the audience, and smiled. "Good evening," she said. "I want to tell you about an equation that changed my life, and about the thousands of other equations waiting to be recognized if we're brave enough to listen." The crowd leaned forward, ready to hear her story, and Maya Rodriguez, former waitress, self-taught programmer, venture capital partner, and builder of bridges between talent and opportunity, began to speak.